Tim Hanstad is president and CEO of the Rural Development Institute, an international nonprofit whose mission is to secure land rights for the world's poorest people, the majority of whom are women. For over 40 years, RDI has worked in more than 45 countries on reforms that have helped to secure land rights for more than 100 million families. RDI has received numerous awards and distinctions, including having been nominated twice for the Nobel Peace Prize, the World Food Prize, and a finalist for the Hilton Humanitarian Prize. Hanstad has garnered awards and accolades from world leaders, policymakers, and governments for his expertise in field research, training, and program implementation devoted to expanding land access, improving tenure security, and advocating for women's secure property rights in developing and transitional economies. His latest book is 1 Billion Rising: Law, Land, and the Alleviation of Global Poverty. In his 2 decades with RDI, Hanstad has worked in over 14 countries and recently returned from a second 2-year post in India, where he helped launch RDI's successful micro land ownership initiative. Like the idea that catalyzed the micro-lending movement, micro land ownership provides the foundation for getting assets into the hands of the poorest to foster self-sufficiency. Hanstad and RDI were recently highlighted at the Clinton Global Initiative for RDI's new Global Center for Women's Land Rights, which will create a platform to advocate for laws that provide secure property rights for women and girls, and to raise awareness about the role women play at the strategic center of poverty reduction and food security. And he is speaking with Ashoka Changemakers today for the first in a series of podcasts in support of our competition, Property Rights, Identity, Dignity, and Opportunity for All. We welcome him on behalf of the Changemakers community. Ashoka's Changemakers and Omidyar Network's competition, for which you are a judge, is called Property Rights, Identity, Dignity, and Opportunity for All. In your opinion, how does property rights bolster people's dignity?
Well, property rights bolsters people's dignity by giving them hope, by giving them purpose, by giving them status within their community or within their family. And this dignity issue, I think, unfortunately, is often overlooked by at least outsiders, outside quote-unquote experts who want to focus on economic impact or look at land in particular as just an economic commodity. What I have seen in the field, and this is both in a firsthand in personal interactions, but also through research, is that this dignity aspect is extremely important. I mean, I could talk about examples from India where landless women report that the most important thing to them from getting a piece of land was now they were somebody within their community. Now they are invited to community meetings. Campesinos in El Salvador who talk about how getting land has transformed their lives, and they describe it in terms of, we used to have to hold our heads down. Now we are somebody, we can hold our heads up. And in terms of the empirical research, we have measured in many settings the various differences that land property rights provide in people's lives. And here I'm talking about people who previously did not have land and then received the land. And there's a variety of impacts: access to food, income, credit, etc. But very often we find that this increase in status, this uptick in dignity, is, from the beneficiary's perspective, the most important impact.
Certainly the issue of land rights is entwined with many other socioeconomic, legal, and political issues. But what do you think is the one single barrier to secure land rights that, if eliminated, would have the greatest positive impact?
I think it's political will. And that's a very general answer to that question. But political will is the single most important barrier to secure land rights. And it starts with awareness, awareness about the importance of the problem. And by the way, on that point, Hernando Soto has done just a fabulous job, I think, in communicating around the world, raising the issue of property rights and why it's so important. Also, awareness. What is needed is awareness that solutions exist. So it's not just the importance of the problem and that it is a problem. One can get stuck there because, yeah, it's a big problem, but it's also very complex and messy and controversial. So awareness that solutions do exist, and they do, is part of tackling that political will barrier. And this competition has a role in that, because I think this competition will unearth, and already has, very innovative work that's going on at the ground level that is showing that solutions exist.
Women are especially disadvantaged when it comes to property rights and ownership. How do you address the chicken and egg issue? Can you have property rights for women in traditional cultures if women are not otherwise empowered? Can you empower women if they do not first get access to land rights? And which must come first?
It's not either or, but both and. It's important to recognize, too, that property rights for women is not a once-for-all intervention that is either present or is not present. Rather, it has to be seen on a continuum. And we need to advance along that continuum, advancing property rights and the strength of property rights for women in various settings in society, while at the same time pursuing other measures that empower women.
Cultural traditions are often cited as key barriers to advancing land rights, especially for women, but in the end it is policymakers who hold the key to the problem, isn't it? What are policymakers' arguments against progress in land rights reform?
Policymakers do play a very substantial role in advancing land rights for women, but their role is not the only role. In many settings, progressive policy decisions can create the legal space for advancing women's land rights, but in most settings, these social barriers that are deep-seated in culture also need to change, and that changing those social barriers involves roles for social activists, for community leaders, for parents, for everyone in a society. So, for example, passing an inheritance law that allows females to inherit land equally to males by itself just creates the space to do it. Still, parents have to be aware of it and actually be willing to give land to their daughters. The daughters have to be empowered to assert that right. And those social barriers are, especially around the issue of women's land rights, very difficult and require a lot of work from a lot of actors.
Join us again on Wednesday, January 26th for Part 2, and on Wednesday, February 16th for Part 3 of this podcast series.